Well, there were a lot of things going on. The students were getting pretty excited, and I would say that it was the beginning of a new era, no doubt about it. 40 years ago, there was new life on this campus, and it was called the DakotaDome.
Well, I was on the president's staff, President Bowen, Richard Bowen, in the late 60s, and I can recall his speaking in staff meetings about the need for more recreational space for students here, particularly in the winter months when there really wasn't much in the way of places for students to have recreational opportunities. And his initial idea was simply a large open space in even a metal building, and that eventually evolved into an intercollegiate sports facility that would be for recreation and sports, including most prominently football.
The whole idea of it was very visionary. For a community our size to build an indoor football facility was a big, big deal. And it took some people with a lot of vision to make that happen.
The great spark plug behind the whole thing was Carl Miller, who was the athletic director. And Carl was a bundle of energy. He had a crew cut. He was like the Energizer Bunny. And he was all over the state evangelizing for this building.
Jack Doyle would be the first person that always comes to my mind. I think Jack was one of the originators. He was one of the people that went out originally to try to fundraise for the DakotaDome. He put his heart and soul into the university and into the DakotaDome and trying to make it what it could be, and then also staying within the parameters established for him by the Board of Regents and the presidents of the university that he worked with.
You know, Joe Robbie was a big part of it. He had the Miami Dolphins for a long time, and I think his group was pretty steadfast in trying to get it done, and they did.
Joe Robbie, a USD alumnus, the owner of the Miami Dolphins, they named him the national fundraising chair, so he brought in a lot of connections.
Certainly Loren Lewis, who was a very prominent businessman in Sioux Falls, and during the most critical time, he was president of the Board of Regents. Very supportive, and the football field is actually named his memory. Rich Cutler just died here in 2019. He was a relatively young, brilliant attorney, and he devised a financing system that allowed us to borrow money tax exempt, and it had to have a special IRS ruling, as I recall. It was so innovative that nobody had ever done it before, exactly the way he put it together, and we would not have had the building, in my opinion, without Loren Lewis and Rich Cutler.
I recall as being a student, there was a lot of controversy on campus about the dome.
A lot of people thought the idea of a domed stadium large enough to play football in was a bit excessive and more than South Dakota could aspire to.
It went through a couple design changes, and I think people thought, it's never going to happen.
The adversity they went through to get it built it wasn't very popular in Brookings, South Dakota. In fact, it was a thing where those people were readily against it. And so they had to go through a lot of hoops.
The Governor Knipe, was very supportive, and he lobbied in behalf of the dome bill, and it was finally passed.
I think until ground was broken here, I don't know if people actually believed that a facility of this scope, was actually going to happen. Finally, the hole was dug and the walls went up.
And from that point on, we knew that Vermilion was going to have a domed stadium.
I was at the initial game. in '79 when Yankton High School and Vermilion High School opened the dome. And I don't remember anything about the game other than at that time the dome wasn't air conditioned and it was so hot, it was unbelievable.
We didn't have air conditioning in the dome. And I remember it being so warm in there. And we did have an advantage over other teams because we practiced in the dome, so we got used to it. But I do remember I was laying on the 50-yard line stretching out, and I looked up, and there used to be a big thermometer, and it said 115 degrees. And I thought, boy, is this going to be a tough practice.
We had a Teflon roof on there, and that was probably the only negative of the dome that we thought, because during the winter months it would get cold and the condensation and ice would form up on the roof. And then when the heat built up during the day, it would rain.
We would keep it cool to save money. And then if we knew it was going to snow, they'd crank the heat so that the heat would melt so it didn't gather up on the roof and then collapse like the Metrodome had that issue. When we did have a big storm, they would send workers up there to clear the snow off. So you could be in the dome and you could look up and you'd see these folks walking around on the roof as they were moving snow off the roof.
The group of janitors on campus would have to come with a big fire hose. So this is the worst blizzard you can imagine. Here they are with a big fire hose walking across the roof, spraying the water, and we would be on the inside looking up, and you would see the fire hose and you would see the people walking around on it, spraying the water on it because they were so afraid the snow would pile up and it would collapse. And then they would come off the roof and they would come into the dome and warm up, and they would just be full of ice. There were crazy stories about the first few times that they didn't know what to do with the snow. You'll hear stories about they took a shotgun to drain the water off it so it didn't collapse. There was actually a time that a section of it did collapse.
It was just amazing how that could stay up there. We often wondered what would happen if it ever fell. And of course, I think it was the second year of the dome when we got a heavy snowstorm around Halloween that they didn't have the roof warm enough to melt the snow, and it came down. And that was pretty strange to walk in there the first time and see the roof actually almost touching the ground. The story I heard was there was so much snow and the roof was all the way down, and of course the snow, it was continuing to snow, so it was just going to accumulate more. And wherever there was a hole or a rip in the dome fabric, the water would come out. But there was one area where it didn't rip and it was just holding it. It kept putting more weight down. So my understanding was somebody took a high-powered rifle and shot a hole in it, which allowed the water to come out and pretty much saved, because it could have caved in the walls. Maybe they didn't know exactly what it was going to do. And then the dome got fixed, repaired, and it went back up. But there was one section that was old yet and had a patch on it. And we often wondered why there was just a patch on it. And the reason is the insurance company wouldn't pay for that section because it was self-inflicted by a USD employee.
The dome was such an icon in the beginning that it probably didn't need, and maybe they didn't have the money to maybe do some of the upgrades that they needed to do as we progress.
When you talk about the aesthetics of the dome, when we first opened, or when I first got here, the west side wasn't really being used. A lot of the concrete block inside the DakotaDome hadn't been painted. The wall outside the training room wasn't painted. You would have cameras on the west side to broadcast, so you could see the crowd, you could see people, but you also saw that concrete wall, just blank gray concrete. And we knew we wanted to paint. A lot of times things like that come down to finances.
So when we took over the facility in 2000, Kelly Higgins sent me to Sioux Falls with a pickup and said, bring me back a pickup load of paint. We're going to paint the dome.
We knew that the walls needed to be painted, so like the wall outside the training room and down on field level was painted white. And then that left us kind of the gray handrails, just didn't look right. So Gary organized a group of work study kids and they started painting handrails.
I thought it was going to take forever because when we got the basketball team involved helping, I mean, if I wasn't watching them consistently, they were in the swimming pool swimming or some other thing. They didn't stay on the job very long, but it's amazing we got it all done one summer.
I think in the middle 70s, earth tones must have been like the thing, right? We had about 6 different colored chairs, and it was this ugly mosaic of seats. And it had nothing to do with like USD. They were all these different colors.
We had brown seats and yellow seats and gold seats and red seats and
reds and yellows, and it was really weird looking, but there was some type of modern to it. And then as the chairs would break, we wouldn't have the right colors to replace it, so then it got really scattered all over.
And it got to be the point where we couldn't buy any new ones, so because they were fiberglass and they'd break. So we would cannibalize the upper rows of the DakotaDome, take those seats, bring them down to replace the ones that were broken.
I think of not necessarily one specific moment, but every time I think back, I think, wow, it's amazing how much it's changed, how much it's evolved, and the color scheme that used to be back here with the yellows and the browns, and to see the dome just kind of go through its revisions has always been kind of fun and exciting.
Well, the biggest update was probably the new roof.
It certainly created a much better environment.
First of all, we had to clean out the dome because we weren't going to be allowed to be in it because of the construction. So the training room actually went to the basement of the North Complex dorms.
We moved all our offices downtown.
Most of the coaches moved down to above the State Farm office.
And it was makeshift at best.
We had athletic offices all over Vermilion because people were dislodged from the DakotaDome.
And they ended up coming in and taking the tarp of the ceiling and pulling it down into here and making kind of a pump in the middle of it, and then they built the roof over the top of it.
Then they would have the roof struts that would come in, and they had these monstrous cranes. They would do 2 at a time so that they would balance each other, and they'd come and they'd attach to that tower. They'd put 2 into place, and then they'd back it off and they'd bring in 2 more. And eventually they ended up having all 16 or whatever it is, 32 that go around. It was amazing to watch because these things the cranes seemed like they were a mile high.
It was just amazing to see that construction process, and the whole parking lot was full of it. Looked like big erector sets out there, and each piece came and they put all those things together and then put the top coat over it, and then we were able to move back into the dome.
When you walk into a place like this for the first time, you truly feel like it's big time.
To me, honestly, when I think back of being a student athlete at USD, the fact that all the athletes worked out there was one of my favorite parts of the entire experience. You would get to the dome at 6 a.m. for your conditioning workouts, and it's like you're just rolling in with your teammates half awake, and there's the softball team doing some planks and running some sprints already. Lights aren't even fully on in the dome, and it's just like we were all in it together.
I definitely wouldn't like to have been the one scheduling everything because, I mean, you had the dance team, you had every sport, every activity was here using the dome. And it was just an area where you just kind of had to learn to deal with what you had. You know, I definitely won't miss some of the training sessions we had here, as running snakes on the stairs.
At times it was kind of crazy, especially when we'd be at practice up in the den. Just hearing all the noise and being loud from the speakers for football practice. So at times it was a little wild and hectic, but I feel like that kind of made it its own place, and it made it harder to walk into for other teams.
The first time I walked out of the DakotaDome in '88, we really didn't know what we were getting into. And I always stayed in the locker room. I didn't come out until right before the game would start, just going through game plans and getting ready to talk to them before we finally went out. And I walked out with our assistants, and the whole place is chanting out "Hate State." And I looked at them and said, "I'm not sure what we're in for here."
After they put it up, they realized they couldn't bring the bleachers all the way out because if they did, they'd essentially go onto the football field. The way they put them back, they really didn't create enough space over there for a sideline. There was no room for a visiting team to stand. So they had both teams on the east side. You went from the 15 to the 45, and then there was a no man's land, and then the other team was from the 45 to the 15. Both teams on one sideline. So that led to a lot of interesting confrontations because now all of a sudden you could talk to each other. They started looking at it and they go, this really isn't a good situation. So they pushed some of the other bleachers back on the west side, on our student side. And I liken it to, they created a little bit of a box canyon for the visiting team. We had room, and now the visiting team had more room. But what they had to contend with were our students. Student sections can be merciless. Typically we would set up a table, and then they would dip out cups of water. So they'd have this water table all set, pre-dip water. And I remember an athletic trainer from another school coming up to me and hands me this cup. And I look at it, and there was actually a minnow in the cup. And I handed it back to him, and I said, no pets in the DakotaDome. Our student section were dropping minnows into the water glasses. And I'm thinking, you know, in reality, that is college, right? That is college kids really thinking, right? Somebody put thought into that. And I told the other athlete, I'll get you water bottles. I doubt they're gonna be able to get it through the squirt nozzle on a water bottle. So we gave them water bottles, but that was pretty good.
Well, during the football games, I saw a dead coyote fly out up in Brookings one time, and we made sure that we were going to pay back very heavily when they came here for basketball.
Back in the day, of course, you would throw jackrabbits and coyotes out on the floor. And
I don't know how many times we went jackrabbit hunting and froze them and had to sneak them into the dome. I can't remember, it might have been my junior year that we went out, about half the team, and we got 27 jackrabbits, got them frozen, snuck them in, and we threw them. We just started throwing them, and they just kept flying out from all over the crowd, so nobody really knew who was throwing them. And then they picked them all up, gave them to Jerry Whitman in the equipment room, and then Jerry came walking out, started telling football players to come back to the equipment room, and he would give us the jackrabbits again. So we did that 3 times that night.
We had everything in here. Track would be having practice, soccer could be in here, softball. We had everyone, and it just worked. Somehow we found a way to get everyone the time that they needed. A lot of sacrifices by everybody, certainly not just with men's basketball, but every sport always wanted more and that. But
sharing was what you had to do. I never had a door. In our coaches' offices. So we were listening to Chad Lavin recruit somebody on the telephone, and I'm recruiting someone else on the telephone. It just, we were all kind of put in a spot and said, get it done. And in most cases, we did.
You had track and field running around the outside. You had a basketball court set up in the middle of the track. You had throws going at one end. We had softball batting cages upstairs. We had the weight room going up there. We had another basketball court upstairs where maybe volleyball was participating. It was virtually every team had cleaved out a small area to play. Everybody used the building, and everybody collaborated, everybody cooperated, and it was really a neat feeling of family. We as athletic trainers have a very unique relationship with our student athletes. We get very close to them, they get close to us because of the nature of our jobs. Okay, we're not yelling at them at practice. We're not getting after them because they're not going to class. We're here to help them become healthy. And one of the things I always did when I started having children was to bring them to the DakotaDome. And I figured what I would do is I would bring them until someone in administration said, maybe you shouldn't do that. And I will say that after the 3rd child, one of our athletic director at the time came down and told me, he goes, Bruce, we need to talk to you about your children coming to the DakotaDome. And I thought, okay, here's where we're gonna have that talk. And I says, yeah. And he goes, I had 6 kids, I wish I'd done what you were doing. And it was like, whew, thank you. The neatest thing for my kids is they had 400 big brothers and sisters. With our youngest, he had the cancer. His first 3 birthdays, were in the hospitals. He didn't get to have a birthday party. In fact, his 3rd birthday, he was in intensive care, and we bought pizza, cake, and ice cream for all the people in intensive care, and they could just come out of the rooms, get something, go back to the room. So he never really had a birthday party. So for his 4th birthday, we asked him, what would you like to do? Do you want to go to Chuck E. Cheese? Do you want to, what do you want to do for your birthday? He says, I want to have it at the Dome. And so we talked about it, absolutely. We hung a sign on the training room door that said 4 o'clock on March 17th, we're gonna have a birthday party. We'll have cake and ice cream. We bought sheet cakes. We had 300 pieces of cake, 5 gallons of ice cream, all kinds of little plates and forks and spoons. And all we did was hang a sign. And we ran out. Yep. All those athletes, all those college kids found time in the middle of their practice time, because remember, this was 4 o'clock. Everybody showed up and we ran out. And it was just, it made you feel really good. And yeah.
One of the really cool things about this building, and we were doing it before anybody in the country was doing it, video board, video production. We would show the start list for a race. We'd show the race, we'd do replays, we'd show the results, we'd put team points up. And again, there was nobody in the country that was doing that.
Well, when you win a conference championship, and the pool is that close, it seemed to be a little bit of a tradition that the kids jump in the pool. And we were fortunate to win some conference championships here in this building, and I guess that seemed to be a tradition.
Well, that was pretty traditional after winning a conference meet, especially if we hosted it. Pretty much the teams jumped into the pool, and the coach didn't have much choice but to get in too.
I'm not sure if I was thrown in or I jumped in, but one way or the other, it was a good tradition.
There's pictures of Coach Gottslavin being thrown in the pool. I remember being thrown in the pool. It was just this great, I even think one year we threw the NDSU coaches in the pool. I mean, it was just this great tradition we had here.
And the swim team was very gracious in allowing us to get in there too. A couple times the swim coach probably would have been upset with that. I have one story I have to tell. We're at a conference meet, and this is, I think, 2006. Mankato is just killing us. I mean, it's you know, after the first day, we're kind of sitting down and we're kind of licking our chops a little bit. And so we have a team meeting, and one of our athletes gets up and says, you know what, no matter what the score is, tomorrow we're going to give it our all. And so we came out on Saturday and kind of had a pretty good run a little bit, and things were kind of going our way a little bit. And it got to a point where there's like 2 events left and we're about 20 points behind, and we're pretty solid in the 5K. And so, you know, our distance coach at that time goes up to those kids, and he and I would talk, and, you know, let's just, you know, let's kind of go with, you know, see what we can get done. And we ended up, they go 1, 2, 3, we scored 24 points. In the conference meet. Well, Mankato scored a little bit in that meet too. So we go into the 4x4, which is the last event of the 17 events you have in an indoor conference meet, and we're a half a point behind, which was, you know, I mean, unbelievable, obviously, from what we'd gone through the day before. And so, you know, we gather our 4x4 together and say, you know what, there's no pressure, just run to the best of your ability. And
right before that final event, we put the team points up on the video board, and everybody in the place knows what's at stake.
So our first 3 legs run okay, and Mankato's leading us. In fact, our third leg gets a little bit ahead, and so our anchor leg, he gets a baton, and the Mankato kid is ahead of him. And the 400 indoors is 2 laps, and so the first lap he kind of follows the kid. You can tell Scott's really feeling it, and so he gets to a point where there's about 100 left, and he passes the kid, and the stands of people, unbelievable. Unbelievable. So, I mean, it was just cool that we won a championship that we probably shouldn't have won, and that it was just talk about going into the pool. We all did.
My husband, Mike Freidel, was a defensive coordinator here. He loved coaching here. He loved the staff. He loved everything about, he actually loved Vermilion. He was a small town boy from South Dakota. I mean, If you're going to pick the most perfect place to coach, where would it be? He was hired to coach under Ed Meyer as assistant head coach. And currently, at that point in time, I was actually working in Sioux Falls at Augustana College. He came home and said, "We're moving to Vermilion." And my entire closet was blue and gold. What I loved about Vermilion, USD in particular, and the coaching staff is the fact that kids were welcome. It's always been a kid-friendly environment. My kids were raised in the Dome. And Mike coached here through spring ball of 2006, and then he had a traumatic accident in Wyoming, and so wasn't able to coach after that. You know, the high school did fundraisers, the community did fundraisers. I was getting cards in the mail from people that I didn't even know who had a sister or brother that lived in Vermilion and just wanted to know that they were thinking of us and praying for us. You know, the USD staff and the athletic staff, people that I worked with, people that worked with Mike, people donated vacation that didn't even know Mike to keep him on contract so that he could get the health benefits to cover the cost of his care. I don't know how we would have done it without the Vermilion community.
When we played Eastern Washington, you know, it was after we came off the season beating Minnesota and kind of fell short in that season, we felt. So we needed to do a lot to prove ourselves that next season. Eastern Washington played Washington, an FBS program, ended up losing by 1 to them. And it was a high-scoring game, 40-41. And Eastern Washington was a high-powered offense. They had the #1 quarterback in the nation. So they rolled in, and again, we packed the stadium. And I can remember Jimmy Thompson in the 4th quarter picking the ball off and, you know, taking it to the house to seal the deal, and the entire crowd going crazy.
Coyotes are coming, a pass, and it's intercepted by the Coyotes. 50, 35-30. It's Jim Thompson to the 5. He'll take it all the way for the touchdown.
That's definitely a moment I will always remember, us knocking off the #1 FCS team here in the Dome.
One of my favorite memories of a game was my junior year. We were playing state, and they said, okay, we can only sell like 350 tickets or whatever before we hit like weight maximum up there. And we had standing room only, and the gym was overflowing, and it was like shoulder to shoulder packed in there loud.
I don't know if it was 300 or it was some capacity, but you had to get there early, especially for the South Dakota State games, because at one point they would just say you couldn't come in. You could sit on the turf and watch it on the big screen like it was a football game, but everybody would always figure out a way to kind of sneak in, and so it was literally packed in there very, very tight. It was a great atmosphere for the volleyball team.
It was really fun just because everyone was in there for us, and like they hardly had any blue and yellow, and it just made it a really hard area for state to walk in and compete against.
We've won a ton of meets that we probably shouldn't have won because they were in the DakotaDome. A meet here really feels like it's in a gladiator arena almost. It's a small confined space. The fans, the teams are right on top of you.
Just the way the dome feels, and it's just electric at some points when you're out there and everyone's cheering for you, and it just feels like nothing can stop you. And that's what this town does for the Coyote football team.
I remember my senior year after I had broke the kill record for USD, and I got recognized at a football game, and just standing there in the middle of the field and just being one person standing next to David Herbster in the Dome, and just looking at all of the fans that were surrounding me, and just thinking of like how cool it is to be a part of USD and be a part of all those fans that were all cheering for me in that moment.
You know, I think probably one of the biggest moments was when the women's basketball team won the NIT. This place was electric. To be the final basketball game in here, that was just a magic moment. You know, the community had really fallen in love with that team, and they kept playing. You know, it was always the last game in the Dome. Well, they win, so then it was the next last game in the Dome. And finally, when they got to the championship game, it truly was the last game in the Dome.
We came out of the locker room with about 15, 17 minutes to go before the start of the game. And we were running onto the court on that corner. and I looked up, and it was just a sea of red, and there wasn't an open seat anywhere. And I will never forget, it's like that image is just like ingrained in my memory of seeing that.
My best memory in the Dome wasn't when I played. It was probably when the women's team won the NIT, the WNIT. That was amazing to look around and see that Dome that full for a basketball game. If you would have told me when I played that we were going to be playing this team 20 years later in the Dome, I wouldn't have believed it. And then if they said, by the way, you're going to beat them, and one of them's Oregon, I would have said, well, you're completely crazy to think that this could ever happen. But we witnessed it.
But I just remember coming out at the end, we had the game pretty much secured, and I checked out, and so did Nicole, and just like to hug my coaches and hug my teammates. And the game wasn't over yet, but it felt like it. And just to, I don't know, it wasn't a sense of relief, it was more of a just like a great feeling that we just did that. And there were so many emotions, just all happy, and then hear that buzzer go off and just storm the court with all the fans.
From the Dome itself, when you walk in, there's going to be a tremendous wow factor. This isn't going to be the same old Dome that I remember, because everybody remembers coming into the Dome on one side, the east side, walking in, wow, then you see bleachers. And so you never truly got a true look at what the Dome was. So I think from a fan's perspective, the amenities on the west side, you're going to be able to enter in from the west side. There's a new concourse, new seating, concession stands, bathrooms, all those types of things. So I think the fan experience will elevate. From a student-athlete experience, well, certainly from a football perspective, locker rooms.
I think it's going to be huge in the recruiting world to be able to have the great football locker rooms and facilities over there, the meeting rooms. I think that will really help our football recruiting in a huge way. I think the second group that we're going to see that will have a big one will be the fan experience. The fans coming in and being able to have those great box seats right there, I think will really put our facility at the same level as going to a Minnesota Vikings game and having those same facilities. So I think that will be a neat fan experience. And overall, just the whole fixing things up in the Dome will help every athlete, because at some point football will move over there and we'll have new locker rooms for track and we'll be able to do all those types of things. So really excited about those renovations and glad to see what they're going to do.
Oh, it's going to be a game changer. I remember as about a 5-year-old, went to a USD-SDSU football game. And believe it or not, I was not wearing red at the beginning of that game. And I remember at halftime, USD was winning kind of pretty big. And I asked my dad if I can go get a USD shirt. And I put red on that day, and I've been a diehard Coyote ever since.
It's gonna be cool to come back and watch a track meet in there even. It's all these little things that just keep piling up and piling up and piling up. It's just gonna bring in athletes, it's gonna bring in more power into everyone.
It's doing wonders right now, so I can only imagine, when it's complete, what it's going to do. But it's obviously going to boost the caliber of player that we get in the football program.
Oh, it's going to be the biggest thing, because now that we're in Division I, we're a little fish in a big pond of everything, and what we're doing here is going to help us immensely. And I think it'll help us keep our best in-state recruits coming here instead of up north to that blue school.
I think when it's done, I would hate to compete against USD in terms of facility for football at this level.
I would say that all the updates in the arena, what it is today, just makes me so proud of USD, just thinking of what it's come to and what it was my freshman year in 2011 to 2019, like how quickly it's changed.
There's so many different events that happen here.
High school football championships wouldn't have happened unless it was for this building.
This Dome has touched more people than we realize.
Players are nonstop asking, when can we get to the new locker room? That's what the vibe around the football players are, is when can we get to the locker room.
The dome is really special. I know this dome is special to not even just Vermillion. I know it's special to South Dakota, and I know everybody's gonna do what they have to do to make sure that thing is tip-top shape, and I know it's just gonna look so beautiful after.
We're not finished yet.
We ain't finished. Go Yotes.
We're not finished.
We're not finished, guys.
We're not finished, baby.